Hi, I'm Dave DeSelm, the Senior Pastor at Fellowship Missionary Church here in Fort Wayne. I've been asked to share a little bit about discipling and disciple making. There's a part of me that wonders, where does one begin? You'd think after 30 years of ministry, 28 years here at Fellowship, I'd pretty much have a handle on this thing. After all, who doesn't know the Great Commission? Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Yet when you really come down to it, I've found, as perhaps you have as well, that this idea of ministry can get kind of convoluted. We can find ourselves quite busy, even efficient. We have to ask ourselves if we're really effective. There were two elements that began to change my thinking on this. The first was a strategic gathering of leaders out of Keystone, South Dakota. And there, my cage was rattled by Richard Green and some of the others as it relates to the essential nature of intentional disciple making. Concurrent with that, I began a personal study which resulted in a preaching series on the life of Jesus. What struck me was I could not get away from the fact that his vision for the kingdom was accomplished by his strategy of disciple making. Though he spoke with the masses, though he taught the crowds, he intentionally invested in the small numbers, 12, and then ultimately 3. One would think that's a pretty slow way to build a movement, and yet after 3 years, with only 120 who had come across the line of faith, they changed the world, ultimately. I've discovered that in my own life, this has resulted in the whole reframing of Fellowship's purpose statement, its vision and its values around discipling and disciple making. I've also realized that as a leader, as a pastor, I had to set the pace. For me, it means a readjustment of my view of success and even a reassessment of my calendar. There are now multiple times a week where I, to be sure, teach the large crowds, where I, to be sure, mentor the groups. But it's the one-on-one gatherings with other individuals, challenging them in their walk and envisioning them unto making disciples themselves that has so marked my life. I've determined that for the rest of my ministry, the focus here at Fellowship and in my life is going to be making disciples who live in the way of Jesus, but also seeing that those disciples make disciples themselves. I'd encourage you to consider it yourself. Study the life of Jesus. Notice how intentional he was in the kingdom, but notice how also he realized the only way to see that kingdom happen on earth as in heaven was in making disciples. And as busy as he was, it meant that he had to do it personally, one-on-one, 1-on-3, 1-on-12, in a way that ultimately changed the world.